Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Barry. I know many, but not all of you, and I am the president of Schoodic Institute here at Acadia National Park. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you to our first winter festival, which has already been underway for a few hours. Chuck Whitney, who is our speaker this evening, led an enthusiastic team in constructing a Quincy this afternoon, which is a snow shelter. It's located down by our picnic pavilion over at the other edge of campus. And from what I understand, Chuck will be sleeping in it tonight. But we had a good crew of adults and children digging that. I guess 12 people were in it when I went and checked it out towards the end of their work this afternoon. And Garrett Conover led a writer's workshop this afternoon. And both Chuck and Garrett will be continuing with other workshops through the next 2 days. You probably know we have a pretty full calendar for the next 2 days. And this is a new thing for us. So we wanted to celebrate winter instead of taking a more negative attitude that sometimes occurs to the challenge of the season. I happen to love it, and a lot of us who choose to be here year-round love it. And we're glad that we brought some folks from further away here for a couple days and attracted some people from the local community as well. So our mission is giving people both a better understanding and a deeper appreciation of nature. We do that in partnership with Acadia National Park. We often take a citizen science approach, which is engaging members of the public, whether they're students or adults, in the scientific process to accomplish those objectives, both educationally and by contributing to the science. And I hope you already know more than that about us. If you don't, please do ask lots of questions, visit our website, sign up for our newsletter, and tell others what you're learning here. So I'm going to now turn it over to Chuck Whitney, who is a local naturalist. He did some of his graduate work right here. And he's going to be talking to us this evening about winter birds on the Schoodic Peninsula, which we'll have opportunity to see both this weekend and for the rest of the season. So with that, please join me in welcoming Chuck Whitney.
Thank you, Mark. I was so pleased when I was asked to do this, when Mary asked me to do this. And this is something that combines several of my passions. I get to do hiking through the woods, tracking. I get to make quinches and sleep in it. I get to talk about birds, take people on a bird walk Saturday. So I was very excited when she told me that there was an opportunity for me to do something. Then she asked me, what would you like to do? And I said, oh, well, I want to do stuff. So how about making an igloo? And all the things I said, yes, yes, yes. So I'm really pleased that it fit with what's going on here. So winter birds of the Schoodic Peninsula was the topic I chose for a couple of reasons. One is that I spend a lot of time here in the winter because I love it. I love the winter anyway, but here in the winter, it is in its glory as far as the scenery goes and as far as many of the birds. We have lots of nesting birds here as well. What I want to focus on tonight are the winter birds, and these are the birds that some of them choose to stay with us year-round, but many show up here because this is a nice place to be in the winter. And most of us think that, well, south of here would be a nice place, but all creatures, especially birds around here, go where the food is, and they can survive in incredible situations as long as they have enough to eat. And so we have an abundant coastline. We have just lots of food opportunities for these birds, and so we have especially sea ducks and some of those birds stage down here, and in October, November, they start arriving. And so in the winter, there's a rich bird diversity here, and it's just a great time to be here. So I hope all of you get out to see some birds over these next few days. And has anyone seen birds today that particularly struck them as interesting? We had, I think, 4 bald eagles in one group fly over while we were making the quinche. We had, I think, a total of 7 bald eagles today flying over while we were working on the quinche. Just remarkable. So anyway, I'm going to try not to talk as much as I can do. I'm accused of doing. I teach school too, so I tend to drone on sometimes, and I pick students out to tell me when it's time to get with the topic. So I'm using this to help me stay focused. So I have a slideshow put together that shows scenes and also shows birds, representative birds. I love to take bird photographs and really soak in the detail that you get from photographs that are taken of these birds that you can't see with your binoculars or in field guides. So I find them really helpful for understanding subtleties and capturing behavior. So I've got some of the birds shown on these slides and others that I didn't put on here. There just wasn't room, but I love to take pictures of these birds too. So I've decided that if someone were coming here to see birds, the challenge is, where do you go? I mean, it's a beautiful peninsula with a lovely loop road that hooks around, and you're showing up here to try to see birds. Where do you go? And so I thought I would focus on 8 places that I go to when I come here to see birds. We do a Christmas bird count here every year on January 1st, and if anyone is interested, get in touch with me and I can sign you up and give you an area to go to. Bill Townsend, my friend, organizes it, and between the two of us, we can have you join us. And it doesn't take expertise, it just takes good eyes to find things. And so what I've done is I've taken the places that we usually find interesting birds on for diversity on this peninsula for the Christmas bird count. And so you're going to see the places that I recommend when people ask me where they should go on this. So the first thing I'd like to do is show you an overview of the places that I'm going to be talking about. So you can see we're following the one-way park loop road from Fraser Point, and I've just called it the West Side Drive. Not really sure, makes me feel like I'm in Manhattan when I say that, but that's that side of the peninsula that we enter on. And across from Fraser Point, we've got, you can see the town of Winter Harbor, and you can see Grindstone Peninsula and so forth. And that's the first place I'm going to mention. And this place is really interesting for several reasons. It's got landbirds that are quite interesting, and most people overlook landbirds when they come here because they're thinking of looking out at the ocean, bringing a telescope. But the landbirds are really interesting here. And in Fraser Point, there are rose bushes that keep the rose hips all winter. So there are fairly often there are mockingbirds there and birds that like to eat fruit, frugivores we call them, grosbeaks, but also sparrows, lots of sparrows there for some reason. It's a real sparrow trap, as we call it. And so we go there to look at the landbirds as well as look at the seabirds, the sea ducks, that I'll be talking more about later. Before I do that, one of the things that I also do is I play music. And you might have noticed that there's a music jam after this. And I've discovered in combining those two passions of mine, music and bird watching, that my instruments that I play, penny whistles, I make and play them, simulate one of the birds that we have around here perfectly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play that bird call and see who here, other than Garrett, can identify this bird, because he knew it instantly when I did it earlier. So what's this bird right here? Perfect, thank you. And the saw-whet owl plays a note in C sharp for you musicians, if you didn't realize that. And last summer I was trying to call them in at the Acadia Birding Festival with a recording, and no response. And so I took out my whistle and played that right there and had 2 of them immediately start calling back. There's something mechanical in this that I think is more real for them. So anyway, without further ado, I'll just show you. This is Fraser Point, by the way. Let me back up for a second. We're looking at, anyone know the name of that island? No, it's the one next to that. Yeah, Norris Island. And can anyone see a bird in that picture? Yeah, a bald eagle eating something it had just caught. I took this Monday. I was driving around to get some pictures. I took a picture and I got home and I I looked, and here's a bald eagle on the ice. I didn't even notice. Anyway, this is the look from the causeway, actually, not really Fraser Point quite yet, but that's what we're looking at there. So here is the bird I just played the tune for. This is a saw-whet owl, and aren't they beautiful little birds? And they are here in the winter, although some migrate south. They start calling any time now. Between now and mid-March, you'll start hearing them fairly regularly, attracting mates. There's a big migration many years from here, but there are always some that do stay around. So saw-whet owl. And I mentioned sparrows. Here's another sparrow that is commonly seen down there. Sometimes I've seen flocks of 100 or 200 called a dark-eyed junco. It's in the sparrow family, and maybe you've seen them. They have white outer tail feathers, and they're here all winter. Also on feeders. Some of you that feed birds know about that. And let me just progress to the next slide. Here's another sparrow. This is a white-throated sparrow, and it's also the Canadian national bird, although they're re-voting on which bird should replace it, which I think is a shame because I think of white-throated sparrows when I'm up in Canada. You hear them everywhere. But that's a bird that's here, and Fraser Point is one of the really good places to find those. So that's another one of the sparrows. So we're not just looking at the land birds, although that's a place where you find the odd ones in this peninsula. But when you look across to Frenchman Bay, across towards Grindstone Neck, you're going to find birds like this one. This is a bird that is quite familiar to those of us that spend time out on the water. It's a black guillemot. And black guillemots in the winter get this grayish plumage. They keep the white wing patch because they don't molt their flight feathers, but they dive down for fish, and they're related to puffins, close relatives, same size as a puffin without the fancy bill. They nest in cliffs and cracks and crevices. Maine is about as far south as they go, but that's a real common bird if you're driving along and looking off to sea. They're delightful little birds. Monday when I was here, it was 10 below zero, howling wind, and I'm looking out at the guillemots. There were 2 or 3 right here at Fraser Point, and they're dunking up and down in the water, and I was thinking, oh, they must be freezing. And then I thought, wait, the water's 38 degrees. The air's 10 below zero. Of course they're dunking. That's a sauna for them. Why wouldn't they be? So anyway, that's a black guillemot. So as we continue from Fraser Point, our second place that we visit, typically there are turnoffs as you drive along the road there, and this is looking over towards Grindstone Neck, and I think some of you might recognize that right there is the golf course over there, the causeway where the golf course cuts down at over in Grindstone, and we're looking at water that sometimes is teeming with eider ducks and other seabirds. This is a place that has an abundance of mussels and clams and things like that. So again, you're looking as you go along shore, there are scoters and sea ducks that you can find, long-tailed ducks, and this area is really a great spot to see them. Often the wind is unfavorable there because it's blowing in your face, but it's really a great spot to check as you go. When I first started bird watching along Schoodic Point, I think it was 1978, the avifauna, the bird life, was totally different. I expected, and we would see boreal chickadees, which is a relative of black-capped chickadee found mostly to the north of here now, but in those days it was a down east coastal boreal forest bird and fairly common, and I haven't seen one in 15 years here. And the places we would find them was this stretch of road right here. We'd just go along with the window down, listen for call notes, and then you'd stop and get out and make pishing noises to bring them in, and there'd be boreal chickadees. The feeding groups are still there. Birds in the winter, especially the forest birds, love to hang out together. It's protection from predators, and there's always somebody nearby to warn you if there's a danger nearby. And so you typically find these small feeding groups, which include black-capped chickadees, woodpeckers, hairy and downy woodpeckers, red-breasted nuthatches. Some of you are familiar with these birds. So this is a good stretch of road because the forest is excellent and right next to you. While you're looking over to the right, you're scanning for seabirds and you're listening for the land birds. And so it's really a great spot to find some of these birds. So let me just show you some of these birds, pictures of them. Black-capped chickadee, state of Maine bird, right? Roger Tory Peterson's favorite bird. What a nice bird to pick for your favorite bird. And they're here and active all winter. Feel free, by the way, if you would like to know more or have an explanation about what we're looking at or add a comment. Here's a angry downy woodpecker. I have the picture there just because it's so different from the typical woodpecker pictures I've gotten, and it was all fluffed up and fussing at something in the tree nearby, and I don't think I ever figured out what it was. But that's a really typical bird of that stretch. And here's its larger cousin, the hairy woodpecker. And hairy woodpeckers and downy woodpeckers look very similar. One thing you can tell easily if the larger bill isn't obvious is there are no little black tick marks on the outer tail feathers on a hairy woodpecker. And if you look at the downy woodpecker, see the little black tick marks right there? So if you have any doubt, and size is really hard to discern in birds sometimes, and this is a much larger bird and a longer bill proportionately, but anyway, that's how you tell those apart. And that stretch of shoreline is a spot where we commonly see those species. And from here, a typical route will take you up the road up to Scootic Head, the Scootic overlook off Scootic Head. And to go up that road means you're walking through the best pure boreal forest, mature forest, which means you've got different birds. And boreal forests tend to be really boring as far as diversity in the winter, but when you do see something, it's usually pretty good. And so we have quite an interesting collection of birds to see going up there. In the last 5 years, 2 or 3 times I've seen blackback woodpeckers and found a nest hole for 2 years ago for those guys. But there are lots of finches and other birds that use that area, and especially in years that we call finch winters, like this one where you have thousands of these little finches coming south. This is an area where we see them. So the look off from the top of Scootic Head, which is the one that I used from the opening slide, is right here. And everybody recognize these islands? When you're looking from high down, it's a little confusing, right? So I know some of you have spent more time on the water than I have. I've spent 16 years out here, by the way, in the summer doing tours. But, and we go right along here. This is a non-working lighthouse, Mark Island Light or Winter Harbor Light, and retired 1934, but still privately owned and occupied. This is Spectacle Island, and this would be Turtle Island over here. And this is Ironbound Island, the biggest island in Frenchman Bay, and then the Porcupine Islands back there. And the flying insect, did you see that? That's pretty cool. So as you're on your way up to this lookout and zoomed in with a telephoto, it makes it look like it isn't very high, or those are really close. They're far away, but the birds that we see, and I put this one in here. I could have put lots of different pictures in here, but I put this one in here because of Bern Heinrich speaking tomorrow. And he did a wonderful book on the energetics of golden crown kinglet. This is the tiniest little forest bird we have, and tiny birds, and he'll talk about it, I'm sure, really have challenges that larger birds don't. They have to maintain that energy level by eating and not just sitting there relying on their bulk. And so this is a picture of a golden crown kinglet. One of the really common birds when you're hiking up there tomorrow on our tracking thing, I hope some of you come, we will be seeing golden crown kinglets for sure on that. I don't think I've ever been up there without seeing one. And along with that, there are other small feeding groups quite commonly, is this bird. Everybody recognize that? Brown creeper, very good. And this is a bird that is a permanent resident. They do nest here under the edges of birch bark is where I found the nest. And they have a high, thin, lisping call, very much like a golden crowned kinglet. And this is a place where you can see them fairly often, which is wonderful in the winter to spot these. Here's the bird that people come here to see. So when people are coming from away, birders, and they find out local people that have seen these birds on Christmas bird counts, they go, where can I go to see a spruce grouse? And I said, well, I'll take you to a place, but it's only maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 15 that I see it. And, but that's what this is, a spruce grouse from up there on the, almost to the top of Scootic Head. And I've seen them when I did my graduate school internship right here, they just closed the Navy base. And we were reverting back to park, and there was nobody here at all except for Bill the ranger, me, and one other person, as I recall. And spruce grouse, 2 or 3 different times, were just walking along in the roads because they suddenly had it back. Yay, they get it back. So anyway, that was a great time, and it's nice to know that they're doing fairly well here. We're still seeing quite a few of those, unlike the chickadees, the boreal chickadees, which haven't done well. So I mentioned the finches that come down in the winter, and those finches, some of them are quite common. For instance, this one, which is a goldfinch. Goldfinches in some years are eruptive, as we say. Thousands of them move south. And again, in the winter, they're moving where the food is. And so it isn't because we have food, it's because there isn't food where they normally would be. And so they will work it out until they find where the food is. And wild goldfinches, as I call them, that aren't on your bird feeders, eat alder seeds on cones and birch seeds as well in the wild, but they just love the feeders that we provide for them, so that's why when they're here we see lots of them. This year has been a great finch winter, as we call it, because we have these thousands of them, and if you feed the birds, these are called, that's a common redpoll, and there are just thousands of them around. I have 75 to 100 on my feeder every day right now, and I have not only that, but I have these guys, pine siskins, even more of those than redpolls. And look at the difference in the bill. Isn't that an interesting bill on these guys? So when you take a close-up picture, you get to see the detail. That bill means that it's really efficient at eating tiny little seeds and picking them out of small cones. Comparing that to the redpoll with a short stubby bill, and they like grass seeds and larger seeds to deal with. And so anyway, when the finches come down, it's very exciting. It's, in my memory, probably once in every 10 to 15 years, we get a big influx, and this is a huge year for them, so it's very, very exciting. And here's another, not a finch, but a grosbeak, they're called, and this is one that I mentioned in '78 when I first started bird watching here on the peninsula. This was the most common reported bird on the Christmas bird counts because people that had feeders, sunflower seeds with a giant beak, they just would clean out your sunflower seed. A flock would descend and just 100 or 200 and clean it out. And it's been years and years since I've seen them. And the last 2 years, I've had them on my feeder, and it's very exciting to see them back because they're really interesting birds. They do nest here as well. I have records of them nesting here on the peninsula, just the odd pair here and there. But in the winter, I'd love to think that they're making a comeback. They're a species that's really in trouble that everyone is talking about, declining almost everywhere. My friends in Newfoundland tell me this year they've had more than, in the last 2 decades. So maybe that's a harbinger of better things to come for the evening grosbeak. And so as we get past come down off the top of the Scootic Head walk, we end up getting to what most people consider the highlight of this whole peninsula, which is where we are right now, the point. Here we are at Schoodic Point, and right near here as well, right out the driveway that we took to get in here is Airy Cove, and you can see this is the point we're going to talk about first. This is from Monday. You can see it was a little cooler on Monday than it was today. Looking across at Mount Desert Island, and let's see, there's Scootic Head for those of you that know the area. And you notice that the shoreline is distorted from heat distortion. How on earth is there heat distortion when it's 10 below zero? Well, the water is 38 degrees, so you get heat distortion in your pictures as though you're out in the desert somewhere trying to take pictures. But this is where people come and they park at the parking area and scan with telescopes and binoculars. And a lot of the way offshore birds in a favorable wind will be brought directly into the point. And so lots of people come just for this, and it's a very popular spot. Some of those offshore birds that we see are quite rare anywhere else, at least in winter in Maine. Here's one of them right here. Anyone recognize that? Yeah, northern gannet. And these are related to pelicans. They're in the pelican family. They dive from great heights just like the pelicans in Florida. And if you're out there and there's a big school of mackerel nearby and you're in a boat, they'll hit the water all around you just like giant darts from 200 feet right next to you into the water. They're really magnificent. And again, they go where the food is. And when we see them in the winter, it's because there's food here. It's been about 3 winters now since I've seen them here in the winter, but it's not because there aren't as many, it's just because the food isn't right here. But they're just wonderful dynamic flyers, and you see them right off the point fairly commonly. Another bird or a group of birds that people really want to see are the auks, the auk family, which includes the puffins, the murres, birds like that. And so here is one of those that we see commonly in the winter, really. I expect that this week when we're out there looking, we'll see one of these, a razorbill. And they're worldwide one of, if not, I think they're probably the least common member of the auk family. The puffin is the most abundant, millions of them in colonies and in a lot of places. But we're at the southern limit of the puffin. But the razor-billed auk, cousin to the great auk, which is now extinct, we have here in the winter. This is a summer picture. I have to give that up to you. I didn't take this in the winter. It's in its breeding plumage, but just a handsome bird related to the puffin and in the auk family that you can expect to see if you look carefully and you're diligent about it. So you go out to the point, you turn around and you come back, because usually the light's in your face, and on your way back you're torn with which way you need to go, and in the meantime you look across the cove, because that cove, called Airy Cove, is just a fantastic place to see birds. Now, I don't show you the water, just the edge of it, but this is the view you get from the island just across the cove from the entrance to where we are now, and there's the Rockefeller building, of course, in the tower. So I'm on Little Moose Island, which is right across Airy Cove. It's very sheltered here. I expect, although I haven't looked up the history, that this is where people would have built boat docks to bring boats in from rough weather and still be out at the point, because this is the most protected place that I know of here at Schoodic Point, out at the end. And it's also a place the birds know very well is protected, because we have rafts and rafts of seabirds, and I'm sure you're all recognizing these, right? Common eiders. But there's one that's different in there, isn't there? Yeah. They're called butterbills by hunters, and that's the black scoter. That's a male black scoter. Used to be called the common scoter. In old field guides, it's still called the common scoter, but and we never understood why it had that name, because you'd go years without seeing one. Suddenly, it was about 5 years ago, one winter I went down to Airy Cove and I looked out expecting to see white-winged and surf scoters, the common sea ducks, and I didn't see any, and I saw about 500 of these. And ever since, that's what you see. I'm sure if you go out tomorrow, right down by the cove and just around the point, you will see, let me just show you where that would be. Here's another view from above. So this is Airy Cove. So right along right in here is where the black scoters hang out now. And so everyone recognizes where we are right now, right? Right there. And the quinchie is down there for those of you that want to see that tomorrow. Isn't that a nice picture? I love Google Maps. It's really addictive. I can go on there and play all day. I just did a screen capture here to show you this. So what I was talking about at the point is this parking lot here, of course, and you scan out here with telescopes. And while people are scanning out, as they were this January 1st, a big group was down there doing the bird count, and they scanned and they talked about all the cool birds they saw, and I said, how about harlequin ducks? And they go, no harlequin ducks. And I walked down to the rocks because I know harlequin ducks live right on the rocks. They're this close to shore, right in the waves, and I think we had 8 right there in the rocks, and they're probably out there right now or will be tomorrow. Harlequin ducks are really common right along in this area here, and also over here on that side of Little Moose Island. What I wanted to point out in this slide also, besides that right there, is as you're backtracking here, because this is two-way, and you go by the entrance to Cirque, come down here, and right there's a pull-off for one car, and you can park right there, and about a little under half tide down, you can walk right over here. And Little Moose Island, what a great place this is. Those of you that haven't been there, it's really worth the walk. Just be careful of the tide. Do it on an outgoing. I've been stuck out there before. There are worse places to be stuck, believe me. But as an aside, if you like cranberries, this place is covered in cranberries, and you can fill a 5-gallon bucket in the fall. So anyway, Little Moose Island. This is a really fascinating little island. It has unique things there, unique plants for sure, lots of plants that are normally found way to the north, but what also has birds that are normally found to the south. There are yellow-rumped warblers out there right now, lots of them. I've had 50 before out there. They eat bayberry, and so this island is blessed with lots of bayberry. They eat the berries. So it's the only warbler anywhere around, probably the northernmost place in the United States where you can find that bird in the winter. And also flickers are there almost continuously in the winter. There are also red fox that you see when you walk around almost always. And besides that, in the evening, if you're patient, it's a huge roost for crows. They go out there. I just love crows. Crows are so animated and interesting to watch. And so here's a pair of crows working on a lobster knuckle. I'd love to know the history behind how it got down to just be a knuckle, whether, what the deal was. And that's a big lobster, by the way. But anyway, they're out there, and they roost there at night. So you can go out there on the island, and you'll see them out there in the evening, just flocking onto the island as a major roost area for crows. If you want to find red fox, by the way, the best way to do it is listen for crows scolding. I've found red fox here several times just by hearing the crows going crazy, and you go over it, and whenever they see a fox out in the open, they scold it. And so that's a way to get a view of a fox if you're interested in that. So Little Moose Island, certainly worth the walk, and not only for the birds I've mentioned, but also it's another spot for sparrows. For some reason, some of the southern sparrows like to stay there too, like fox sparrows normally are farther south in the winter. And white-crowned sparrows I've had there in the winter, and some really interesting birds. But this is our typical sparrow right here. This is one that if you have feeders, you've probably seen, called a tree sparrow. So I had to get a picture of it in a tree, which wasn't easy, because they're usually on the ground. But this is a bird that breeds Newfoundland Labradors, the closest to here. But in the winter, they show up, and they're really easy to tell because they have a two-tone bill, yellow on the bottom, dark on top, and they're rusty rufous on the back. They're big, and they have a black spot right in the middle of their chest with no streaking. And lovely little sparrow that's quite common out on Little Moose Island most winters. So head out there and look for that. So as we leave Little Moose Island and we're heading along on the loop road, the next stop in our stop of 8 here is Blueberry Hill, the parking lot. What a cool place that is. I've seen so many great birds from Blueberry Hill. Every time I go there, I have no idea what I'm going to see. You'll see robins there in the winter. You'll see peregrine falcons. And last year, I looked over with my binoculars at Little Moose Island, and there was a snowy owl perched that I could identify on a stump. And as I watched it, a harrier, a marsh hawk, was flying along the beach. So you never know what you're going to see when you're there, but there's always something interesting to see at Blueberry Hill. Also, thick-billed murres, for those of you that know what those birds are, that's a place where you see them more than almost anywhere else. So Blueberry Hill's an excellent stop-off spot. And that, I just wanted to point it out to you for those of you that don't know where that is. So you're coming by the turnoff for Little Moose and drive right up to there. You see the circular turnout, and that's Blueberry Hill. And just check off this way and, well, all around here. Standing on the rocks, looking out this way, you can sometimes see harlequin ducks right in there too. Also, as an added bonus, if you want to put on your snowshoes, you can walk that road right there. It's a lovely walk in there, which you can either take up to the top of Scootic Head, or you can just walk all the way around to the gated part a few miles farther. And that begins, we're back on the one-way road after this, so we're headed what I call the east side. From Blueberry Hill, looking out, and some of you that have been there probably know it, I don't quite have it here, there are ledges, these big ledges that are exposed at low tide, and that's a great place to see a couple of specialty birds that you might not see elsewhere. The first one is these, the only sandpipers we have here in the winter commonly, purple sandpipers, and they live right on the rocks, and I caught these in a picture just as a wave hit, and I thought I'd ruined it because I missed it, and then I thought, no, that's pretty cool, I'll save that one. And so you see a few purple sandpipers. There are flocks of hundreds when you see them sometimes, so purple sandpipers are great little birds that it's amazing how resilient they are to live in the rockweed zone and just pick out all the whatever that they get to find as food. And they're there. That's a great spot, looking at those ledges across from Blueberry Hill. And also, we have this bird, which you might recognize immediately as a cormorant, but this is a great cormorant. This is a northern cousin of, or the eastern cousin, really, of the double-crested cormorant that we have commonly nesting here. And from Blueberry Hill and from the point, you're looking over at Schoodic Island that I mentioned where the snowy owl was. Double-crested cormorants nest there by the hundreds, maybe thousands. And this past summer on our way to Petite Manan on the tours I do, we saw a couple of these in breeding plumage. So they may have nested there last year. I don't think there's any record for Frenchman Bay nesting, but nearby. This is a bird that used to be called the European cormorant. They're abundant over on the other side of the Atlantic. Newfoundland's got a few places where they nest. They nest on cliffs usually, but in the winter, this is the one we see, the great cormorant, and that's how you know that it's getting to be winter when you see those. So I wanted to show you a picture, even though it wasn't from Schoodic Island, of last year's snowy owl invasion we had. They were everywhere. And this is from Trenton Airport. I guess once you've seen one, you've seen them all, right? But anyway, and most of them were young birds. They had a really immense hatch year the year before, and unprecedented numbers of young owls. There were some couples that had 8 and 10 chicks in their nests that they raised successfully. Some years it's 1 or 2. And the one picture I really enjoyed seeing circulating in the internet, that a snowy owl had made a nest of lemmings. Instead of using grass and sticks, they took lemmings, their food, and that's what the nest was made out of. I think there were 30-something collared lemmings in this nest. That's really neat. anyway, a lot of them didn't make it through the winter. They followed many birds that did not survive the winter. But there's been a rebound year this year. Garrett has seen them. I've seen a couple. And they've been at Bangor Mall. There was one on one of the signs for a couple of days that people got to see. So they're all around. And again, they go where the food is. So there was a pair that nested in Newfoundland this year up where I'd like to go. And that was pretty unprecedented for those folks up there. So we leave the Blueberry Hill area, and that continues us around on the eastern side. And this is just a view of the road from Mundy that we take to remind folks how beautiful it is and what it looks like. This is a great spot to look for ducks and things in the water. Maybe you've done that and noticed that we have common goldeneyes, we have grebes, all sorts of interesting birds that are in pretty close. But one of the birds that is also there, which means we have fewer grebes and goldeneye, are these guys, the ones we saw flying over Quincy today, American bald eagles. And I think last year there were 22 pairs nesting in Frenchman Bay. 30 years ago there were 2 pairs, and neither one successfully raised chicks. Talk about a success story. So on the tours I do, we had some days we had 25 eagles that we'd see. They're everywhere. The kids, your grandchildren today, when we were building the Quincy, four eagles flew over, and I go, look, eagles! And they go, yeah. And they just kept digging away. It's like, yeah, so what's your point, you know? So when you got kids like this that, you know, oh, it's like a starling or a pigeon, who cares? That's a good thing for the eagle anyway. So let's see. That takes us, one more bird that I wanted to show you from this area that we commonly see too is a loon. And this is a speckled loon, a rare no, it's not a subspecies. This is just molting into winter plumage. Has the same red eye that you get when you get a nice picture. And common loons, when they finish nesting on the ponds, the adults have this really interesting habit of kicking off the young because they don't want the competition. Loons nesting on ponds don't have as many fish, so they kick them off. And so the first birds we see are the immature loons. This is an adult that probably bred this year. They go right to the ocean. And they've done banding studies that show that the loons here in Maine tend to go to the closest place on the coast nearby. They don't migrate from, say, you know, interior Labrador down here. They go to the closest salt water because they know they'll find food there, supposedly. So we have hundreds and hundreds of loons out there all winter. And if you listen, one of the really neat things about loons is they call all year long. People don't know it. If you're out on the ocean at night in the winter even, you hear them calling just like you're in a pond up in the Allagash or something. It's just wonderful. So they're vocal all year long. So loons, and I think, what was it, 5 years ago now, on our way by here, looking at Rolling Island, the island you see just off the end there, I found a Pacific loon, which is a western bird, which is pretty neat. So there are rarities that show up there as well. So that takes us from the east side to what used to be one of my favorite places in the world, and still is for Cindy and some others, Prospect Harbor. And back when there was the sardine factory there, it was a bird watcher's heaven. You'd park your car there. You had to have it power washed when you got home, but there would be thousands of gulls. The people that worked there would walk out with umbrellas to get into their cars because there were just thousands and thousands of gulls because of all the byproduct of the sardine factory. And I have just so many great pictures of rare seagulls. I think I have 12 species of gulls recorded from there when it was a sardine factory. I love gulls. I just think they're great birds. Most people don't, but this is the place, or was the place. And this is such a great spot. If you haven't been to Prospect Harbor, it is such a beautiful place. Looking across at the light, and the the alley boats are just over this way on the moorings. So you see the lobster traps there. They're still, it's mostly lobster fishermen, and they've converted the building into a lobster processing plant. And I'm not, is that going pretty well, or good, good? People are bringing lobster in from all over, yeah.
I don't think it's in working order right now.
Oh, it isn't? Yeah, that's always a good thing, right? So I think 2 weeks ago I was there, and the parking lots were packed, and it was really going strong. But then Monday it wasn't, but that was a holiday, so I didn't know. Anyway, this is just a beautiful little harbor, and there are lots of interesting birds to see in Prospect Harbor. Seabirds again are probably the highlight, and good looks at common eiders. Here's a pair of them. And when there's lots of ice, when they were canning and there were thousands of eiders there, they eat mussels and barnacles and wrinkles and things like that. And the biomass was so high because of all the effluent from the plant that was going out through a giant pipe under the water. And so it encouraged huge growths of the shellfish, and that's why we had so many eiders. And one day I counted 5 eiders up on the ice that had leg bands. I couldn't get pictures to identify the numbers, but lots of these birds, I think, are local birds that nested nearby that have been banded that we see there. Here's one of the gulls. I could put 1,000 different gull pictures in this, but this is one of the ones that used to be one of the most common birds there. All white wingtips. They're in a group we call the white wing gulls. This is an Iceland gull. And one that I did see one on the Christmas bird count down there this year, but I counted some days 30 or 40 of these down at Prospect when they were canning. Out of, I think one day I estimated 7,500 gulls, and I think there were a total between several species of this group, probably 30 or 40 of them. The rest of the state would report 1 or 2. So it was really the gull central for a long time for the unusual gulls. And so anyway, that's a picture of one of my favorite groups of birds. It's a first-year Iceland gull. They nest way up north. They nest up way up Baffin Island and east. You find Iceland gulls, and also all the way across to Europe. But they do come this far south in the winter, and a delight to see. You see the bubblegum colored legs. That's one of the tip-offs, that's what you're looking at. And anyway, so speaking, and I mentioned that about seeing gulls with bands. See the right leg in this bird? So I'm taking this bird's picture because it's strutting around with this kelp stipe in its mouth, almost like it's proud, and I'm thinking, what on earth is it trying to do? And I just happened to notice its right leg, there's a band on it. I said, wow, that's pretty cool. I wonder if I really work at it, if I can get the number. This is a friendly bird. So I spent about an hour taking pictures from every angle with my highest telephoto, and I got all the numbers. There are 9 numbers on the band, and I finally pieced it together, and I got on the internet, and I sent it to Patuxent, where you send in band recovery reports, and I said, here's, typed it in, and they have a computer do it now, not a person. And I instantly got back this thing, congratulations, you found the band of a bird that was banded in 2009 on Great Duck Island by John Anderson. And so, who's a friend of mine, so works at COA. So I emailed him, and here's one of his friends from 2009 that he banded in the nest. So I thought that was pretty cool. So modern photographic equipment can really be helpful, I think. So the bird didn't have to die, and we know where it is. And I still have not figured out why that bird was acting the way it was, but that's okay. And I'm going to be going back to see if it's still there and acting silly or what was going on. But I'd never seen them do that behavior before. As we leave Prospect Harbor, that's the end of our Schoodic loop. But I have one last picture to show you here. It's of a bird that is commonly seen in Prospect eating the pigeons. You know, they're about, well, the beginning of the season, there are typically 40 pigeons on the roof of the building by the factory. And this time, like the last time I was down there, I counted 18. And on the Christmas bird count, I had a Cooper's hawk grab one of the pigeons, got a picture of it. And other years, more often, this is the bird I see. And this is the last slide because you notice this is the end of the peregrine. and I sent this to a friend who I thought was going to make it, but the snow was too bad. And she emailed me back immediately, and I said, cool picture. And she said, yeah, but what's the little white thing it's trying to catch? I said, it's not trying to catch that. It's pooping. So think of the odds of you taking a picture and catching that in mid-flight, right? How many people have seen that? I mean, isn't that cool? Yeah. So not only that, but you actually, well, you can see the cloaca if you're really that interested, but they pull their feet forward because they hold their feet straight back when they're flying normally. And I saw it flash its feet down thinking it was going to do something cool, so I just started taking, you know, a series of pictures. I got home and I said, oh, there's dust on the lens, and I went, oh, wait a minute, oh, look what I got, yay! Anyway, that's a peregrine falcon flying away after enjoying a good meal, I'd say. But anyway, the peregrine falcons, one last thing I wanted to say about them, were extinct in the lower 48 states, and they were reintroduced. One of the first places was over on Mount Desert Island and on the Precipice Cliffs, and they brought chicks in. Cornell and Fish and Wildlife worked together to raise chicks remotely so they wouldn't imprint on people and feed them up on those nests. It's called hacking. And the birds that they used to reintroduce were not the same strain of peregrine falcon that was here that became extinct. So now the falcons are here in the winter. They didn't used to be. They'd all migrate. They'd go down to South America and pick up doses of DDT and other pesticides. And so most people feel that that was their demise, was the pesticides down there. These birds don't migrate. A lot of them hang around. You see peregrines all winter. You never used to, at least people tell me. Peregrines were so rare. If you saw one, you were ecstatic. It was, you know, the bird of the year for you. And now they're just everywhere. They're nesting and they're hanging around, but they're a different genetic strain than what was here. So the one that they came up with to hack turned out to be well suited for this area. And we do see them all the time. And pairs right now are already getting friendly and frisky and thinking about nesting. And so anyway, I thought I would leave you with this picture. And thank you for your attention. And thank you very much. Oh, yeah, yeah.
So Chuck is happy to take a few questions, but I'll ask that you use the microphone if you do have a question and hold it right below your lip or it won't hear you. So if anyone has any questions, we can do that. Otherwise, we have music in a few minutes.
Hi, could I have seen a merlin this time of the year?
Yes, you could. Merlin are the least common falcon, but we do see them. 2 years ago actually it was one squeak, we had a merlin.
This was in Winter Harbor.
Yep.
It was very brown, which is the reason I thought it wasn't a peregrine.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, a young merlin is brown. We call them chocolate merlins, and so a young one is. Although, are you sure it wasn't a Cooper's hawk? Because again, I saw that one catching pigeons, and it's probably hanging around.
Not 100% positive.
Yeah, and yeah, if it was like a small version of a peregrine, it was probably a merlin. Yeah, because that's just what they look like. They do nest in Maine now. They didn't until about 20 years ago, merlin. But they head south just like the old strain of peregrines did, from what I know. Although we've seen a few in the winter here, but they're not common. But you certainly could see one. Did you? Great. Where was it? Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. Maybe it's the same bird just hanging out there and making a living. Was yours brown? Was it? Yeah. Great. Great. They don't, Merlins don't do well with other falcons. They don't play well with others. They're ferocious. They chase anything that gets near, especially when they're nesting. They'll take your hat right off if you're walking down a road and they're nesting nearby. And I've seen them chasing bald eagles. One pair nested over on Long Porcupine Island, and bald eagle flying along, minding its own business, it thought, and two merlins came out and attacked it, so feathers were flying out of the eagle. So they're so maneuverable that, I mean, they're just really, really terrific little flyers, so I guess they thought it was worth the risk. But yeah, other questions?
I'd just like to comment, your photographs are absolutely wonderful.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. It's really hard to parse through photographs and decide what to put up. I didn't want it just to be about, oh, look at the pictures I take. I wanted it to be maybe educational too on where to see things. So, yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, maybe we'll go ahead and wrap up there. Thank you again. And as we indicated, we do have a music jam after this, but there'll be some treats outside first. And hope you'll join us for most of the next couple days as well. Thank you.